Hello, in this video I will show you how we can create this marquee effect using React. To do this, we will first create our initial component, then add our marquee animation, figure out the multiply function, tackle server-side rendering issues, and finally look at a couple of different animations we can do. Let's look at our initial setup. We have an Next.js application and a simple page that displays the text hello. We first need to create our marquee component. We can call it cool marquee. For now, I will export a simple component from this file. And because of my folder structure, I will re-export it again in index.ts file. Now that we created our marquee component, we can use it inside page.tsx. Let's check if this worked. Nice, we can see our component on the page. Now let's shape this cool marquee component. First, it needs to take children as prop. The children property is necessary as we want this component to be generic. Since we are not giving any children to our component at this moment, nothing is seen on the page. I downloaded a couple of brand logos and stored them in this folder. We can use them to create our marquee effect. Let's create a page.constants.ts file and store our brands here. If it's a constant variable, I generally like to use upper snake case. We will only add the brand names, the path will be dynamic. Now that we have the brands array, we can use map function to create image component for each brand. Since I'm using Next.js, when specifying the image source, I can think public folder as the root folder. With these changes, we can see our brands, but they each have a different size. Let's fix this problem by giving them some CSS. I will use module CSS since it is more convenient, but you can do the same in a normal CSS file. I will create a class name called brand and import it in my page.tsx file and use it in my image element. Nice, our images are more organized. And yeah, don't forget to give alt property to your images. Okay, everything is ready for us to create our marquee effect. In this part, we will create our animation. First, create a module SCSS or normal CSS file for cool marquee component. In this file, create a new class called container. This will have the following CSS properties. We want flex layout. To prevent children to shrink, we will set flex shrink to 0. To prevent them to grow, we will set flex grow to 0. We are setting flex basis to auto, so the children's initial size will be automatically determined. This CSS property is important. We are setting overflow x to hidden. When the brand logos start to slide, we will not see brands outside the container. Finally, we are setting width to 100 so that the container can fill up the available space. Let's add the CSS to our component. We first need to import it. Then add to our component. Because of our flex properties, brand logos gathered in the first row, and because of overflow hidden, we cannot see some of the logos. Now that we have the necessary layout, we can add marquee animation. I will use framer motion for the animation. We need to wrap our children with motion.div component. For our animation to work, we need to pass an animate object to motion.div. Let's create that object and call it marquee animation. The first property we will add is x. Since we want our logos to go from right to left, we start at 0% and go minus 100%. For this right to left animation, we will set a couple of transition values. Duration will determine how much time will the animation take from start to finish. Ease will determine the flow of our animation. We will set infinity to repeat property since we want this animation to never end. Let's add this animation object to our motion.div component. When we refresh the page, we see this error. This is because we are using Next.js and app router. Right now, Next.js sees our component as server component. For framer motion to work, we need to specify this component as client component. By the way, I'm preparing a video about app router, server components, and client components. So if you don't want to miss, you can subscribe to my channel. After refreshing the page, we can see our animation is working. Not the way we want, but that's okay. To fix the layout problem, we need to create another class for our animated container. We can call this class marquee. It will have the same flex properties as our container. The only difference is our min width property. Now that we created this class, let's add it to our animated container. Yay! After these changes, we can see our brands sliding from right to left. However, it is not a continuous flow, so let's fix that. The fix is easy. We just have to copy and paste our animated container. And after a refresh, yes, we can see a continuous flow of brands sliding from right to left. Let's give them some room by adding padding to our brand class. I will use padding shorthand, so it will apply 16 pixel to right and left side. After all this work, we finally have a marquee component, but we are not done yet. Everything is working fine with our current structure. But what if the initial content size is smaller than container size? If I leave only the Discord logo, our marquee component is not working the way we expect it to. To fix this problem, we need to multiply the children until its size is larger than the container. To get the containers and content size, we can use useRef hook. We need a state to store how many times we have to multiply our content. I will call this state multiplier. The initial value will be 1 because if it is less than 1, no content will be visible. Now that we have the necessary variables, we can create a function to calculate the multiplier. The first thing we need to check is whether our container ref or marquee ref is empty. If it is, we cannot do any calculations. Then we are using getBoundingClientRect function to get an object providing information about the size of the element. In this object, there is a width value that we will use in our calculation. We need both the container's width and marquee's width. Now that we have everything we need, we can do our calculation. Our first case is if marquee's width is smaller than container's width. Let's say that we have a container with size of a 350 pixel and a content with the size of a 75 pixel. If we divide container with the content width, we get 4.6. If we multiply the content only 4 times, there will be empty space. Because of that, we will always round up our numbers. Let's write our logic. Since we want to round up, we will use math.scale function. If the marquee's width is already larger than container's width, we don't need to multiply. We created our calculate function, but we haven't called it anywhere. We need to do this calculation only once, so we can use useEffect function. I will add a console log to check our calculated multiplier value. When I hit refresh and open web console, we see the multiplier value as 1. Something is wrong. The problem is that we created 2 useRef hooks, but we haven't connected them to any element. Let's do that. We will connect container ref to parent container and marquee ref to a new element we will create. This is because the animated container can have more than 1 children. We need only 1 to check the width. We need to add CSS to this element as well, so let's create a new class name and call it first marquee. It will have the same flex classes as the other marquee class. After creating the class, we should add this class name to our component. Okay, now let's add our console log again and check whether the multiplier calculation is right or wrong. Nice, we are seeing the correct value after connecting the useRef hook with the components. We know how many times we have to multiply, but we don't have a function called multiply children. Let's create that function. It's a simple function that takes 1 argument. The argument will determine how many times we will multiply. We will add a condition to our array size. If the multiplier value is a negative value, array size will be 0. I'm doing a hack to create an array with the given array size. We will map each element in the array and convert it to React fragment component. Do not forget to add key property. In each fragment, we will render our children. And that's our multiply children function. Since this function uses children, we need to pass children to our dependency array. And now we can call this function. For the first animated container, we will call it with multiply -1, since we already have a children rendered. For the second animated container, we can use the multiplier directly. With these changes, the Discord logo is multiplied enough so that our infinite marquee animation works seamless. However, there is one tiny problem. Let me show you. When I hit refresh, for a small second, I only see 2 Discord logos. Let's look at how we can fix this problem in the next part. Okay, before fixing this problem, let me tell you why this happens. Next.js renders our component both on server side and client side. However, on server, useEffect hooks are not triggered, and since multiplier's initial value is 1, it doesn't duplicate children. If we prevent Next.js from rendering our component on server side, the problem will be fixed. To do that, let's add a new state called isMounted. The default value will be false, and if it is not true, we will not render our component. Since we are not updating the value anywhere, our component is disappeared. If we add a useEffect hook and set isMounted to true in this useEffect, our component will be rendered only on client side since useEffect is not triggered at server side. Okay, let's check if this worked, and nah, it didn't work. Why? Because we need to update our useEffect hook where we call calculate multiplier. If isMounted is false, we don't do any calculation, and we need to add isMounted to our dependency array as well. Okay, it is working. Nothing bad will happen if I refresh, right? Oh, what is happening? Let's fix this problem in the next part. To fix this problem, we need to track both our content and container. For this, we can use ResizeObserver API. Basically, ResizeObserver will trigger calculate multiplier function when the dimensions of marquee or container change. We don't want to continue observing when this component disappears, so we will disconnect in our useEffect return function. With isMounted and ResizeObserver, we don't see two Discord logos in initial render anymore. Before finishing the video, I want to show you the benefits of framer motion. If I remove ease option, we can see animation speed decreases and increases in different velocity. Framer motion gives me a lot of power. If I want, I can add an extra keyframe and change the feeling of the animation. And always I can bring back ease linear. That's it. Thanks for watching this video. If you really watch until this point, don't forget to subscribe as more tutorials will come.